I'll give you just a kind of a quick overview of what I'll go through. I'll give you a bit of background on who CME is. I'll talk a little bit about what's going on in the labor market today from a manufacturing perspective, more generally, specifically referencing some of the results from a management issue survey that CME did with colleagues in a bunch of other associations, including the chemistry industry and FPAC last year. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of the strategy that we think needs to be implemented going forward. And now we're in business. So just generally, this is the size and scope of the manufacturing sector in Canada today. About 1.8 million employees, about 12% of GDP, 63% of exports. But most importantly, it's about 75% of all private sector R&D. So we're the manufacturing sector, including chemicals, is the wealth generating section of the Canadian economy. The manufacturing sector, the 1.85 million employees, there's been a lot of discussion about the decline of manufacturing. I think many of you know in your own companies it's far from dead. This is the current workforce in Canada, third largest of any group in the country, and growing. It actually grew by about 150,000 jobs last year, and these are all high-paying, high-value jobs. The employment numbers are spread out. This is the percentage in every province of how many people work in manufacturing, obviously centered in primarily in 3 provinces, but also a fairly even distribution across the country as a whole, with about, again, the 10% of the Canadian workforce as a whole. But in addition to how many people work in the industry, they're also high paid. The average weekly wage of someone working in manufacturing is about $1,000 a week, which is the highest of any industry when you factor in how many employees. So we're looking at about a $1.8 billion weekly payroll in the manufacturing sector, which is significant more than anyone else. What's interesting is obviously you talk a lot about mining, oil and gas, some of the natural resource projects. You can see they're kind of the payroll size that those sectors have in the economy. Still significant, but not to the same size as manufacturing. So I mentioned that last year we did a management issue survey. We asked our members, we asked the members of the manufacturing coalition that we work with, a series of questions on kind of what really was important to them today and what's important going forward. So I'm going to give you a few slides and some of the results so you can get a sense of, to Pierre's point about is there or is there not a labor shortage and what kind of the impacts are. And this is specific data from just a year ago. So first off, when we asked about what drives investment in Canada, you can see 2 of the top 3 issues are actually related to labor. One is labor cost, which is obviously going to detract from investment, as well as the availability of skilled labor. Those are 2 of the most important things. Obviously, the strength of the market, people aren't going to invest where there is nowhere to sell, is the number 1 issue, but labor ranks very high in the top minds of executives across Canada. And you look at what they say it's going to take to create a globally competitive labor force in Canada, what those issues are that they're looking at specifically that help them invest. 3 things kind of jump out and 4 a little bit, but labor costs still are high up there. The aging workforce is a significant concern, and then ongoing upgrading of skills to make sure that people are productive. Labor shortages, surprisingly, is a little bit lower, but that's more of a longer term thing, so there's looking at kind of short term impacts. And then we asked kind of, okay, well, what are the labor shortages today? So this isn't, TD coming out and saying, no, there isn't any, because they're just using mostly bad data. This is actually what companies told us last year, including probably many of you in the room. Almost 50% of companies today say that they have labor shortages, and this is what that looks like across the country. What's really concerning is that in provinces where there's high unemployment, say Newfoundland, companies have the highest rates of saying to us that they have labor shortages. So you see Newfoundland with almost 55% of the respondents were saying they had labor shortages today. And on the flip side of that, Alberta, where we spend most of our time talking about labor shortages, was actually below the national average in our survey anyways. When we ask then again about kind of, okay, what's going to happen over the next few years and where you see the labor shortages today and going forward, there's 2 areas that I've circled on the bottom and for a specific reason. One, skilled production. Everyone thinks manufacturing is non-skilled and just screwing bolts onto something. This is the biggest area of productivity growth in the company normally is on the skilled production side. And these are, that's the biggest priority for companies in terms of where the labor shortage is going to be, where they're going to get those skilled workers from. And then the other side is on marketing and sales. although it's a little bit lower than a lot of the others. When we ask companies kind of what the most important skills are for growing their companies, marketing, sales, administration, that side of the business is always the most important side identified, and it's also one of the ones that is highlighted as one of the highest areas where there's going to be skill shortages. This is the one of the most concerning slides that I ever put together. I actually have the circle in the wrong spot, so just ignore that. You can move it over to the left. Generally, when we talked about, look, if you remember back a few slides, talked about labor costs being a huge impediment to investment in Canada. The response to companies when there is labor shortages is increase the payroll, which is the exact opposite in some ways you want to go, because then it's going to make them less competitive and make it harder for them to attract investment into Canada. But there's two things that I want to point out. It's concerning business growth and moving production to other countries. This is a huge economic problem for Canada. I know right now, today, we've done 2 surveys over the summer of our members specifically on kind of the lost economic opportunity from not having the right people or enough people to do production. In Alberta, our members told us it was about $10 million per company that they were losing in sales per year, pretty significant loss because they can't take on the orders. In Saskatchewan, we asked our members, only about 25 companies responded to a survey, and collectively they told us it was about $1 billion in lost sales every year they were having. That is a huge economic problem that Canada's got. But worse yet, it's going to get worse. Companies are looking at in the next 5 years to move that production out of Canada because they can't get the sales, they can't service their customers from a Canadian base, and that's a huge problem for the long-term competitiveness of Canada. So I'll go through kind of some of the stuff we're working on in terms of our priorities to try to address this. This is just kind of general problems, but just to highlight a couple of things. The major project boom, natural resources, upgrading all the manufacturing that's going into that, is driving a lot of jobs in Alberta, obviously. But what people forget about is those jobs aren't located just in Alberta. They're right across the country. Newfoundland, I mentioned on here, they need 70,000 new workers over the next decade. They only have a population of 500,000. That's a huge draw that they can't fit. There's not enough people to work there, and they can't get people going in. So it's a problem in Alberta. It's a crisis in Newfoundland, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and some of the smaller communities. And then, as I'm sure Catherine will talk about, when you start looking at northern remote communities in Northern Ontario, Northern Quebec, and the forestry industry, people aren't moving there, and they have those same jobs. A lot easier to get someone to go to Calgary than it is to get someone to go to Timmins, Ontario. And I'm from the area, so I know. But so just, that's really key. Demographics continues to shift. It's a huge problem. And we really think that there needs to be a much broader, comprehensive national strategy on skills, which is what the ACCC was talking about on Monday in their session, which was a great session. There's two areas that I'll mention on quickly, and I think I've got 2 minutes, so I got 2 slides to go, so it's perfect. We need to focus both domestically and internationally, and I'm not going to go through all this. I'm just going to highlight 2 things. One, the Canada Jobs Grant. We're big supporters of the Canada Jobs Grant, only because it allows companies to self-direct where the funding is going to in training. It needs to be employer-driven, as they can still work with community colleges and with universities for the training, but it needs to be driven by the manufacturers and industry more broadly. Second, interprovincial labor mobility, international labor mobility is terrible in most cases. People can't come into the country or can't move across the country. Skills certification isn't often recognized, and that's got to be addressed. It's something that we can address in Canada ourselves. And finally, and maybe most importantly domestically, we really need to focus on getting youth re-engaged in manufacturing. For too long, the high schools have cut out all the technical training programs that no longer exist in most cases. There are a few exceptions in Ontario, a couple I know across the country. But when I went through high school, everyone had to take shop and everyone had to take home ec. That's gone now. All that education, all that introduction to these types of skills that we need are completely gone, and therefore no one's getting into them and no one's going on to do the apprenticeship programs or other things that we need them to do. On the international front, just really quickly, we really need to look at kind of the trusted employer for the movement of people in and out of the country. The immigration reforms that Minister Kenyon will probably talk about are really critical that will go into place next year, because it'll create a demand pull system rather than us just kind of bringing in random people that don't really fit the skills of people, of employers. And finally, we need to see some changes to the temporary foreign worker program. And I'll just say in closing, kind of 3 things to remind people of. 1, there's shortages today and they're about to get a lot worse. 2, those shortages are undermining economic activity today in Canada, and given the importance of the manufacturing sector, it's going to, and what our members are telling us, it's going to get worse from an economic perspective going forward. And 3, we really need to focus on a broad-based national skills strategy with a primary focus on getting youth back engaged in manufacturing careers and the skills that manufacturers need across the country to grow.
Bonjour tout le monde. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for your invitation. And as Matthew said, it's quite a coincidence to be here just after the Skills Summit that we held on Monday, and I'll be able to share with you some of the outcomes. And so I'm here today to talk to you about the fact that in fact colleges can be part of the solution if you want with respect to the skills gap. So if you look at this, it shows you how many colleges are members of our associations. It's basically most of the colleges that are publicly funded. And we are in 1,000 campuses across the country, literally from coast to coast to coast. And as you can see, we serve 1.5 million learners. So that's a lot of people every year that go through our college system. The one thing I should say still about this is that 90% of college students find a job within 6 months. And this is a statistics that we are very proud of. And now we have 22% of students that have a university degree that come to our colleges because they know that they will find a job within 6 months. So we are very pleased about those statistics. This show you a bit about how we function in a college system. You can see that, of course, we work with community, with government, but also with business. Every course that is being taught in a college have what we call the Program Advisory Committee. Those are people made up of business. And what they do, they give us advice on the curriculum to ensure that we're always leading edge with respect to what we have. There are some companies that are very good also at giving to colleges some equipment so that it is helping the colleges to be able to ensure that what they teach, again, is leading edge. And the one thing that is important with respect to that Program Advisory Committee is that most of the courses that are being taught in colleges, if they are in official program, if you want, they always have an internship or a place where the students can go to have some work experience while they are taking that. So again, this is a good source for you or to offer them summer jobs or something like that. Skills shortage or not. In fact, when we started our Skills Summit on Sunday night, we had Rick Miner, who has proven through statistics that there is a skills shortage. And then we had Don Drummond that said to us, and I'm sure you've seen it in the newspaper before, that there's no such a thing as skills shortage, a bit like what TD Bank did a couple of days ago. But in fact, if you took it in an aggregate way, it's true, there's no skills shortage. There are many people looking for a job and there are many jobs available. Problem is that they don't have the competencies that are needed or they don't want to move. So what is happening is that, and I'll just make an aparté with respect to the labor market projections from ESDC, the former HRSDC department, that indicate that in fact there's a need for chemical technicians and technologists, and it will increase over the coming years. And yourself, recently you mentioned that there's a strong pull, for example, in Alberta, with respect to the chemical company wages to retain workers. So, and when wages increase, it's because there's a shortage for sure. So if you looked at the next one, colleges and institutes, in fact, are there for you. That's our job, to prepare students for the labor market. we do that for you. So we need to know from you what it is that you need, where is it that there's a shortage, so that we can convey that back to the college. And so if you are in a given locality, I do invite you to communicate with your college if you haven't done so. But if you represent a company at the national level, please come to talk with us so that we can ensure that we can convey that information to the given colleges and tell them about the needs. So, of course, our colleges offer, I will dispel a myth right now. In colleges, we have programs that are 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and 4 years. So that means that we also give degree to students that are like a university degree, if you want, but done in a college. The only difference is that it's applied learning. The second thing that often happens, I told you about those 20% of students that are from university. Often what we do, if they already have a university background, depending on the field they want to work in, if it is in the same discipline, we put them on a 1-year program, and then they can have a postgraduate diploma, but from college. And so, as you can see, you see the variety of, and I won't enumerate them, but you see the variety of programs that we have in our colleges. And of course, we also have other applied science and engineering technology programs. We have, for example, I'll just give an example. We have 5-degree program in biotechnology at Cité Collégiale and Fanshawe College, and we have one in petroleum engineering, for example, at State Polytechnique. One of the things also that could be of interest to you, every year there's a conference of we have networks of vice presidents and deans of technology that meet annually. So if at one point you would like to come to address them as a group, so that it's a way to reach out to the entire community at the same time, we would certainly welcome that. So the next one, we do a lot of applied research thanks to the Government of Canada, who recognize the importance of colleges that work with the industry. That's part of our DNA, to work with the community, work with the industry. And what happened is that we receive funding, and there's a program that could be of interest to your company. It's called the College and Community Innovations Program. So you come, you present the issue that you have, and together with the college students, you are able to find the solutions for your problem. Just last year, we worked with over 4,500 small and medium business companies to solve the problems of those companies. And this gives you how many institutions across the country that are engaged. As you can see, it's close to 80% of our colleges that are involved in that, and you can see the number of students. Companies like that, because often they find future employees also when they work with us. The next one, I thought I would give you just quickly 2 examples of applied research that are being done, one from BC and one from New Brunswick. The one for BC, it was a chemistry department and students that worked with MB laboratories to develop a comprehensive and cost-effective method for local farms and businesses to test pesticide residues in fruits and vegetables. And this, of course, will result in long-term benefits for Canadians. On the other hand, you have le Collège communautaire du Nouveau-Brunswick. What they did, the biorefinery scale-up center partnered with local engineering companies to test a CO2 infusion system prototype to purify biogas for cleaner energy. And of course, we have hundreds of examples like that, and we have a full report of those, and I would be more than pleased to send you a reference to those so you could see where the types of projects and where that your company could benefit Something else that often is not being talked about enough is the Aboriginal people, Indigenous people. Of course, it's a large untapped resource. We worked very, very closely with our colleges to ensure that we work with the industry as well. We have a report that talks about the best practices that companies have used. So again, we would be pleased to give you access to that. I will talk about what we do with essential skills. I could talk a full hour on that, but I'll be very quick. What is happening? We found out that there were a number of students that didn't meet the level 3. There are 5 levels. At 3, you can function in the workplace and at school. There were a number of students that couldn't function at level 3, and we gave the same test to a number of employees of companies. Guess what? Same results. About 32% couldn't meet the basic skills, and there are 9 essential skills. So now what we do, we're working with the colleges work with companies directly to help them to upgrade the level of their employees, because you hear often about issue of productivity, or you hear we give them training and they don't get it. And so what we do, we tailor-made it, make the course, and it's all made according to the job skills, but at the same time they learn the basic competencies. And this has been quite successful. We have tests that can be given now, and the industry is amazed by the change it's making in their own company. And the National Skills Summit, I thought I could not come here and not talk to you about that, considering about, the importance. I'll talk to you about, in fact, what we will do with that. We used to have an employee coalition that was quite helpful in helping us to improve the infrastructure in colleges. But now we will focus on skills gaps, so we will put these coalitions back. So again, if your associations want to be part of it, or if there are companies here that would like to be part of it, we would be pleased to have you there. One of the things that is important is that we must improve the incentives for apprenticeship, because right now there's not a lot of incentive. Mathew talked about it. And one of the problems, it's parents. Parents really want their kids to go to the university, but often parents don't know that if you work, for example, as an electrician in Fort McMurray, like the son of one of my friends, he is earning $200,000 a year. And he works 10 days and then he has 10 days off. 10 days work, 10 days off. So nice lifestyle. So the biggest skill shortage is leadership. In fact, leadership to make sure that together we address this problem instead of just talking about it. And I'm confident that colleges can be a game changer to address the skills shortage, so I welcome your support on that.
I'm going to change gears a little bit and I've been asked to touch base with you on how our trade association, the Forest Products Association of Canada, is assisting our member companies in what can only be viewed from our perspective as a very challenging and urgent business challenge. Addressing the skills shortage issue is a priority area for FPAC, and particularly, obviously, for our member companies. So, to get started, here are some ideas that fly a little bit in the face of the Don Drummond report, but this is just a partial picture of data we were able to pull together that talks about the challenge that we're facing. The magnitude of the challenge is very significant if you look at retirement replacement as well as economic growth, and you make some fairly conservative assumptions. We're looking at three quarters of a million of new hires by 2020. I can say for our own industry, we are feeling this already. We're looking at 17,000 over the next 2 years. And of course, the numbers that are shown for the forestry sector there are very valid indeed, and in fact, somewhat underreported. I was disappointed that I couldn't get chemistry industry numbers for you, but I gather you did not have an HR sector council, so I wasn't able to drum that up. So again, a very small slice seems to demonstrate to us a fairly significant challenge, and certainly this is the view of FPAC member companies. A little bit about our background and our context. The forest industry is a $57 billion industry, supplying important product to over 100 nations worldwide. We are global companies, but we do operate in a very local way. We essentially are in rural Canada, where 200 communities are almost entirely dependent on the forest products industry for their livelihoods. We have 236,000 jobs, and just to help distinguish our upstream from our downstream, about 200,000 of those jobs are in manufacturing. And in addition, over the last decade, we have experienced 100,000 job losses. So this is we've been through a very challenging time. Yet, we are still seized with the challenge of employee recruitment and the skill shortage that we're going to face, the labor shortage overall that we're going to face in the next coming decade. I do want to point out skilled labor is a really important part of the picture, but we are seeking workers from all across the spectrum, and so we've seen some nice figures already that demonstrate that. But indeed, just like in every other sector, the forest industry needs the chemical engineers, the accountants, the laborers, the truck drivers, etc. So about 18 months ago, the FPAC board members requested FPAC to make the HR issue a priority issue. And with that, we established an HR committee of our association made up of the management of HR for our member companies, so the VPs or the senior managers of HR for those companies. And we worked with them significantly to identify the areas in which a trade association can support our companies. Indeed, the trade association's not out doing the recruiting. That is the job of our member companies. So what is the role, or is there a valid role, for the trade association? So what you see in front of us is the areas that the HR Committee of FPAC and the Board of Directors has mandated as the key areas for FPAC's role. I am going to touch on a number of these in just in a sort of a flyby way. I don't have much time, but I will concentrate on the branding piece because I think it's quite interesting. At the same time, the member companies of FPAC really want to take an approach that targets the key demographics, if you will, that are in our communities. So earlier, I think we were talking about community-based approaches, and in fact, that would be our view as well. We'd like to hire as much as possible from the local communities and leverage the things that we bring to the table in terms of that. So the ability to keep the youth of these rural communities in their communities with their families, the ability to enjoy life where you work and where you live. And also, of course, First Nations. First Nation communities are very much neighbors of the forest products industry, so we're working hard to target that demographic as well. So on branding, one of our challenges, as you can imagine, losing 100,000 jobs over the course of a decade, was to convince Canadians, the general public, our governments, our key stakeholders, that we're in fact not a sunset industry, but an industry with an exciting potential future. And we've done a lot of various pieces of work in this regard, biopathways, transformational strategies, etc. But we wanted to put a crown on it that made it quite understandable at the Rotary Club speeches in each of our communities, if you will. And so with that, we developed something called the Vision 2020, which is a fairly simplified vision that talks about the future potential of the industry and where we're heading. And while I'd love to spend a half an hour talking to you about vision, I'm only going to concentrate on the one stretch goal at the bottom. We've identified these goals, to communicate to our communities and our key stakeholders that we are actually committed and needing to renew our workforce by 6,000 new hires by the year 2020. So it's really a key part of our toolbox to communicate that we are back on the track of reinvigorating our workforce. Another area for us, and this is a really interesting and exciting place, is the greenest workforce. So in addition to doing the vision work, we wanted to do something very specifically targeted at attracting people to the forest industry for their place of employment. I want to point out very explicitly that this is not a recruitment tool, but it's a branding tool. So we wanted to dial into what were those factors about our industry that would attract these future prospective employees. And the types of things we came up with, as you can tell by the name, was our renewability, our green attributes, our commitment and to the value of sustainability. But also our, as you'll see in the next slide, our feeling of you can live and you can work where you live, you can enjoy the quality of life in the rural communities that certainly the people from there very much appreciate. Just to say what's on this website, this is it's a web-based tool, and there are paper versions of it. Of course, we are the paper industry, but we definitely have what the type of information you'll find there are the types of jobs we have available in this sector, what you can expect to earn in those jobs, what type of education you need, and where you might go to get that education, and really trying to connect the information about our sector's job opportunity with these folks that we're hoping to attract. This is just an illustration of the look and feel of what we are putting together to brand in the branding area of what working in the forest industry looks like. It's very calm and reassuring in my mind. I wish I was actually standing there at the moment. But the quality of life aspects and the sense of outdoor living, etc. By the way, on the greenestworkforce.ca website, there's some very interesting testimonials, unscripted testimonials of people from every walk of our employment perspective or spectrum, talking about what it feels like to work in the forest industry, and it's a highly moving experience. Okay, so our sort of vehicle of choice for the greenest workforce was to use social media. And so just to give you a little bit of sense of the metrics of success, we have earned over $1.5 million in earned media, and I am sure the media experts will tell us how important that is. We have strategic partners that we have built linkages with on this issue. We have partnerships with a group called Talent Egg. I don't know if you know them. I think they reach 1.8 million students or so across the university and college spectrum. And we've received, in terms of our hits and our observations in Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, the Webosphere, etc., we believe we've reached 500,000 Canadians. And for us, that's shocking. I don't know what success looks like for the CIAC, but for FPAC, this is a quite significant figure for us in such a short period of time. We launched this program just this past February, so we're thrilled. We're also very excited about the second part that we are flagging on this slide, which is the Green Dream internship program. Now, all of our member companies use internships to drive employment into, to basically as a bridge for those graduating students into the industry full time. But what they've done, and they often will have hundreds of these, but for us, they've given us over now, as you can see, 24 internships to work with as a branding tool. They're real live internships, and they're real live, they really do hire these folks, but they're letting us use them in our greenest workforce to brand the industry and really provide some reasons for these young people to get involved and engaged. Now, what's happening with the internship program is they also need to there's a requirement, if you're involved in these, that you need to blog. You get an iPad mini and you're required every 2 weeks to blog your experiences. And what we're seeing is that this is sort of it's like the Energizer Bunny. It just keeps on giving in terms of a program of getting the message out. So we're very pleased about that. And we've just launched the second one a month or two ago, and it's continuing to work for us quite well. Other areas of activity, some of those other bubbles that I referred to, partnerships, obviously working with our federal and provincial governments. They have a key role to play in terms of addressing the HR challenge, our Aboriginal communities. And we're also doing tools, for example, for our member companies on how they can recruit and retain Aboriginal peoples. This is there are different cultural things you need to consider, so we're trying to assist. On the policy front, advocacy is core to FPAC, so obviously having a fully developed advocacy program to ensure we're leveraging and getting the maximum effectiveness out of the federal policies is very important. And ensuring we have really good supply-demand data by region is crucial. And we were just meeting with the Deputy Minister of the new ESDC a couple of days ago, and they're seized with this as well. You saw by my very first slide, we have very limited, I'm done. I'm on one more slide or two, I think. We have very limited information, and I believe this is an area that we all could do more with. In fact, we could work together. Okay, see, I am done. There we go. Last slide. So we don't believe that there isn't a challenge in front of us. We very much do believe that there is a critical issue. There is no silver bullet. We have tried to find a single, one or two shot approach, and in fact, we do need to do a multi-pronged approach. The associations have a role to play, I think, but it's limited, just like everybody's role is limited. We've focused on the objectives of whatever can be done that grows the pool for everybody is something that we really encourage. So we're not into only policies or positioning that might be competitive. We're actually very interested in growing the pool of workers and supply in Canada for everyone. We do want to continue to brand the forest industry as a positive employer, and we do want to create these tools for our members that they are so far feeling are very, very helpful to them. And finally, I'd like to close with a point, and I think we've begun some discussions with several associations about how we may be able to work together in places that are non-competitive to advance our cause. And we've specifically identified data, skilled trade promotion, and certification recognition as three areas that we all have something to gain by in terms of working together. So I do hope that CIAC and FPAC and other like-minded associations can work together to advance that cause. So thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to any questions.
From our perspective anyways, I guess the biggest challenge we face is when we think of skilled workforce are welders and boiler makers and instrument techs, and I didn't hear a lot today about addressing those other than a comment about we need some alignment with parents and expectations, which is helpful, but from a development perspective, I didn't hear much about that today. So I'm wondering if anybody has a perspective on that.
Yes, you're right. I didn't elaborate on that. What I can tell you is that right now, most of the facilities or the schools the colleges where they offer trades, they are at capacity. I'll give you an example. Algonquin College, some of you may know it, it's here in Ottawa. They just built a brand new building. There's enough room for 110 people, but the Ottawa regions would need 3,000 people trained in trade because of some new development that are coming with the light rail and other projects. So there's a problem of capacity right now. A few years ago, there was an issue also with respect to the colleges were not eligible to the infrastructure funding that the federal government had put in place. And so it was thanks to the employer coalitions that in fact there was more funding given to colleges to equip their colleges accordingly and expand, because Unfortunately, it's a matter of space right now in a number of provinces. So whatever can be done to support us with that would be much appreciated. And there are still some pockets, I would say, in rural area where you don't have a lot of students still because the parents don't encourage their kids to do that, unfortunately. We are also working with a program that is called, and we do that on behalf of the federal government, it's called the Canada Integration Immigrations Program, by which it is for provincial nominees as well as federal nominees. And what we do basically is we offer training, not in the trade, but we offer like a 1 day about what's the culture in Canada, in the workplace. We simulate interviews with them, and we looked at their credentials, and we connect them with the accreditations body of their discipline. So that's another source that we have and that we make available because we organize virtual fair. And 52% of the people that come through that program find a job within 6 months in their discipline or where they have worked before, which is not the story that we hear about the engineers that is a taxi driver or things like that. So there are a number of ways, and I would be pleased to provide you more information on the trades. And if you have a particular need in a particular region also, I would be pleased to follow up with you bilaterally.
Matthew?
And sure, I'll just quickly add on in terms of what we're working on. There's two particular areas that I'll mention. One is the interprovincial mobility of those individuals. Once they get their tickets, they typically can't move. They're restricted, which is not very bright. But these are the problem with all of this is that the system, the apprenticeship system, the skilled training system, and everything was something that was established in the 50s and 60s based on a totally different economic reality. And Minister Kenny may touch on this, but the labor laws and the labor unions then are very different than they are now. And for some reason, they still are very provincially siloed, and we need to work with the unions to help them understand they're actually limiting their own growth and their own economic opportunities. So one would be the movement in between. The second piece would be on the apprenticeship program. In some provinces and some skills, you have to have 5 existing journeymen for every apprentice that comes through. That doesn't work anymore, not when you're facing a demographics problem. And so we really need to make sure that those ratios right across the board are adjusted to modern realities, not to impact safety or anything like that on the job, but that needs to be more realistic. Like we've even offered in some areas, like a 1-to-1 or a 1-to-2 ratio is probably more realistic for today than a 5-to-1 is. So I'll.
Excellent. Thanks. Catherine?
Well, I guess I just really concur. First of all, if I didn't mention those particular skills, then I'm not doing a great job for our FPAC member companies, because indeed they are worried about those skills. But in fact, they are also worried, as I tried to say, about a variety of other areas. I think we can do a lot more, though, to address the cultural barriers, doing a lot more collectively to promote what it's like to have skilled trades and what the realities of work. I mean, there was quite a buzz in the room when we heard about someone's Fort McMurray experience. So, I think there's an awful lot to work with to promote that and try to get at some of the cultural barriers as well. And I guess FPAC really would like to engage with the other associations on this to get that message, to help and work with other like-minded associations to help get that message out.
Excellent. Denise, you had a little
Yes, I
supplementary?
just wanted to add that the national summit, because skilled trades came out loud and clear, I made a commitment to explore the possibility of do a promotional campaign on skilled trades. But for that, I would need the support of the industry. So if there's interest, let's talk about this.
Just a comment, I guess I'd challenge the notion that we should try to put the skilled training back in high schools. A, it's going to suck out people from the workforce that we need out there, and B, it's very costly, and C, it's probably not the right model. I don't know what the right model is, but I don't think it's putting it back into high schools. They're stretched. If we're waiting for the resources to come to do that, we're not going to address this problem. There's got to be another societal mechanism outside of the Monday to Friday school system.
I would disagree, but and largely because if you don't do it within the system that they're learning in, they're never going to be exposed to it. And yes, I know that there's problems with in terms of how you fit that in the resources that are necessary, but I think it's important for industry to help support some of that directly. If they want the workers of the future, they have to invest in them today. It shouldn't just be left up to the governments all the time to do it. Industry's got to step up and do it themselves to some degree. And the other thing I'd say is one thing that I didn't realize actually that Minister Kenny said on Monday in his speech was that one of the primary reasons that these types of activities left the primary school system, both in the grade school and high school, was because of the way the union laws changed in terms of who could teach in a classroom. And I didn't realize this, but what happened in the 80s, there was a change in terms of who was allowed to teach in a high school. And that change meant that everyone had to go to teachers college. Well, a mechanic or a welder is never going to go to teachers college. So it never meant, I don't think anyways, it never meant to remove it in some ways. Yes, it was defunded in other ways, but the real structural change that happened was that change in terms of who could teach in the classroom. And that, again, it was something that undermines the abilities of kids to get involved and learn some of these skills. It doesn't have to be an all day, every day for every kid, but what we're looking for is when I was in grade 6, I took welding classes and I got exposed to what it could be like. I didn't choose that path, but at least I was exposed to it. Today, my kids going through, they won't see any of that. They'll have no idea what's out there. And if we don't do more together as groups between the associations, as Catherine was saying, and working with the groups like the ACCC, there's never going to be that opportunity to even expose them to the jobs in the first place, because it is the easiest way to get their minds wrapped around it. So I think there are ways you can do it. It's a challenge. It's a huge challenge.
The point about industry providing resources was something perhaps correct, but if you go back to parents in today's environment and say we need $3 million for our local high school, they're not going to prioritize skills. They're going to be looking at the knowledge economy, whatever is still left of that, and thinking about that.
Maybe there could be a way also to look at, because colleges often it finishes in May, and the students from elementary and high school are still in school, so maybe there would be a way to use the equipment that is there in colleges instead of reinvesting. So that's something probably we should talk to the School Boards Association
and we even run programs in both Manitoba and Quebec through CME where in Quebec, for example, in order to graduate high school or CEGEP, you have to actually spend a week inside of a manufacturing facility. So our members open their doors, and every community, their manufacturers opening their doors to bring people through. And it's not to teach them how to weld, it's to show them the opportunities in manufacturing. So you can imagine the look on a kid's face and say, well, do you want a career in manufacturing? And they say, no, not really. And then you take them into Bombardier or a BRP or someone like that and show them how a snowmobile is made. And maybe the kid's interested in art. Well, you can pretty easily transfer art skills into industrial design and designing snowmobiles and airplanes and stuff like that. And so it enables the kids to understand what the opportunities are, aside from, some people are interested in cutting down trees. I know I am, but there are it's the broader spectrum of skills that are available.
Just replant.
Yeah, exactly. And opening the eyes of the kids. So there are a lot of different models, and we're involved in doing some of them as well. And I think it's important to explore all of them.
I know that in some Aboriginal communities, some of the colleges, what they do, they have what we call mobile trade training center, if you want, that go in communities for 3 months, and then the students can try for, I think it's a week or 2 weeks at a time, I forgot, but different trades. And they look at, do I have any interest or any ability with some given train, and after it's a way to encourage them to pursue and come to colleges.
I hear a lot about these issues with skills shortages, and we've seen some contrarian views in the media recently. Are we aware anywhere, either folks in the room or our guests, of projects that have been delayed or couldn't go ahead because of skilled shortages?
Do you want to start?
Yeah, I have. We have some real challenges in particular areas of our country where we're very worried, and it goes back to the boiler operator question, with where you need to have certain skills to operate your facilities, and those folks are getting poached on a regular basis to the point where there's now bonuses for people to find those types of people and bring them into the mill. So it's actually a daily operating concern. So not a project-based concern, but even in terms of the existing manufacturing operations ability to do what it needs to do. So the experience of the companies, and again, this is different depending on where you are in the country, but in the sweet spot, although your data didn't show it, Matthew, our data shows it in the sweet spot of Alberta. There's lots of challenges from that perspective, just in terms of our ability to do a business.
I have one very specific example. I don't know if it's public, so hopefully I'm not being quoted anywhere, but Case New Holland, which is one of the world's largest manufacturers of agricultural equipment. Their Canadian operations are in Saskatoon. They employ about 1,000 people in that city, which is a pretty significant number of employees. They were, a couple of years ago, they were looking at consolidating all of their kind of Midwest operations, including moving operations out of the US into Saskatoon. They had spent 2 years developing everything and putting in, they were looking at about $1.5 billion investment in Saskatoon. A month before they shut down their factories in the US to move everything there, they realized they couldn't get the extra 500 workers they needed to move, to put everything into Saskatoon, because there's just no one. The unemployment rate in Saskatoon, or in Saskatchewan as a whole, is only about 4% or something like that, similar to Alberta. All of that production, as a result, none of the investment came to Saskatoon. All the production remained in the U.S. And Case New Holland invested another $2 billion in that U.S. facility. It's now their largest facility in the world. That could have been all in Saskatoon. There wasn't enough people to make it happen. So that is something that TD, Don Drummond, or any of these people who study this can't capture. It's not in the data anywhere. It's real stories from real businesses and companies like you. That's what data can't capture. And no amount of economic analysis is going to be able to tell you how much missed opportunity there is for not having the right people on the ground. So there, you asked for one example. That's a really good example from just over the last 2 years of a specific economic loss for Canada.
I have a couple more examples, but maybe I won't go into more examples, and just suffice it to say that, you know, we had the good economists of the conference board do some of these projections for us for our development of our vision, et cetera, and we definitely see a tremendous challenge ahead of us. So I'm not sure what the data set differences are. We haven't gone in and explored your point, Matthew, about poor data or anything, but there is a disconnect between what the couple of reports that have recently been in the media are saying and what we're experiencing in real time in the companies.
Okay, excellent. Yes?
Yeah, I'd just like
Ed.
to say, I'm from the transportation industry. We are experiencing significant labor shortages, and we talk about the efficiencies of our industry and how do we make sure that we can compete on a global basis. Well, it's there in spades when it comes to the transportation industry. From a maintenance perspective, we are unable to obtain the mechanics that we need to repair our equipment. The shops that are in Alberta and BC and Saskatchewan are lined up with trucks, but there's no mechanics to repair them. So what the consequence of that is that we have existing assets that are not being put to work. The impact of trying to hire individuals and the cost associated with bringing people from across the country has exploded in terms of the costs that are happening today in northern Alberta as well as in northeastern BC. So we see this as a very, very serious problem, but it's not just in Alberta and BC. We see it right across Canada. We have labor shortages in Ontario, we have labor shortages in Saskatchewan, and in the Atlantic provinces. So it's a serious problem. It's masking efficiencies that we could have in our business if we had the ability to bring a workforce into our industry to support the transportation of goods for the chemistry industry as well as just the general transportation of goods. So I don't get those reports. They certainly don't exist in our industry. They don't exist in North America, the U.S., labor shortage of drivers is approximately 300,000. They expect to see a shortage of 300,000. We expect to see 25 to 33,000 by 2020, and that's on very modest growth. Our economy is just limping along here, and we're still struggling to hire the right people in the right locations and train the people that we need. Thank you.
Okay, I just got the signal that we're going to have to wrap this up.